A Mantrap for Russia. Everything you're about to see is up to every one of us, because it determines our common future. Russia is obviously on the edge of chaos. How long are we to endure this? All Russian mass media proclaim that coup and Maidan destroyed Ukraine. Yet, essentially the same Maidans were initiated all over Russia. Navalny's rallies took place. He has already called people to seize the Kremlin. I can see here enough people to raid the Kremlin, the White House, right now. After such rallies, people are detained massively, and repressions will obviously toughen. Indeed, armed coup was already held in Russia in 1993, followed with foreign intervention, obviously planned colonization and outliving of aboriginal population. Economical collapse in Russia is comparable to Ukrainian. People have been put to the edge of survival. Obviously, the colonist system is applying extreme means of suppression toward them. 2,000 Dagestan long-distance truckers went on strike. After Platon, the heavy truckers' predatory charge system was introduced and deprived them of means of subsistence. Those hungry people were surrounded by troops with armored carriers. While people of Russia carelessly rummaged around their pockets, the elections to the State Duma flew away. The same decrepit old bag of bones retro politicians broadcast. Elections of the president are coming. But the population is immersed in troubles, not to pay attention to these most important events, to give up. Almost every day news shows report on new laws adopted. They are mainly punitive and are to shut up population, to deprive it of property, to raise taxes and tariffs. The population is passive, they stand by, just are watching and listening to how budgets are being approved, social benefits are being reduced, prices are being increased. People are waiting for the hero to take them away from the trap, waiting for a new Lenin or somebody else, brave and strong, who will help, who will rescue the country. Have you ever thought that such brave hearts do appear in our life? Can you see them? Have you ever paid attention to what happens to them? And still there are those who take care about people. This is my country, and I will fight for it. Dignity of male population of Russia has been humiliated for the last 3 decades. From breadwinners, they were turned to easy riders. And unfortunately, that is governmental policy. When our wives, mothers, sisters recognize that the homeland is in danger, they stand together to protect it and become warriors. I guess this is the character of the woman, a brave, well-balanced, broad-browed person, capable to call things by their real names. Svetlana Lada-Rus, candidate of psychology, has created a method of social stress disorders prevention. The method is based on the person's inner resources revitalization and enables a person to overcome any distress and health disorders. High effectiveness of the method was medically proved. She has published more than 4 psychology and political analyses. She produced 2 extensive documentary projects, Through the Apocalypse and The Deceived Russia, which made real revolution in minds, pulled off the screen of life under which contemporary politics is being created. She submitted 6 statements to the FSB, Investigative Committee of Russia, General Prosecutor Office and the State Duma, attracting their attention to the evidences which prove that Putin and Medvedev were involved in illegal change of constitutional order, acts of terror in Russia, high treason, criminal negligence, forcible seizure and retention of power with elections. She founded People Oppositional Party the Voля, which first initiated people rallies in Russia and most actively worked with people. The party was liquidated by Putin's regime in 1916 with a fraudulent scheme. She took part in about 10 elections of all levels and every time disclosed fraudulent schemes of election fraud. Consistent and brave oppositionists, Svetlana Lada-Rus and her associates, have been both secretly and obviously persecuted by law enforcement system. 7 million rubles were allocated from Governor Merkushkin's surroundings to Tольятти City Edition Obozrenie in payment for ordered smear campaigning against Svetlana Lada-Rus. Meetings with people, renting halls are denied, articles are denied, book selling in big shopping centers is denied, disclosing of the matter of the case is prohibited, using of her complete quotes is prohibited, telling about positive results of her activity is prohibited. Imagine, they close your mouth by force and abuse you with all their might. How is that? However, there is a staging policy when smear campaigning develops into a threat to your life. Smear campaign is but an auxiliary element and means that liquidation of the person is being prepared. If and when it happens, everybody says, "Fair, he was too bad." Serves you right. Few will trouble to sort things out. Official website of political party The Vola has been shut down. Accounts in social networks have been blocked. The founder herself is under international search. Her closest fellow member, Marina Gerasimova, was placed behind bars. That was the reaction. This is the way the system responds to those who fight for truth. The actual perpetrators are those who thieve, deceive and violate the law. The party was eliminated hurriedly, just prior to elections to the State Duma, when all necessary documents for participation had been submitted. Obviously, fraudulent scheme was applied to liquidate the party. I have never seen another person to put questions so openly to the Federal Security Service, the General Prosecutor Office, Putin and Medvedev. I can see no other person like that. The power fails to respond on TV, press, nor internet. We have never seen authorities to climb. The Vola party brought false charges against us. There is no reaction. I think they behave so intentionally, not to reveal that we have real leaders who can protect the people. Svetlana Lada-Rus is defender like that. Kvachkov is like that, but he is imprisoned now. The last hope for social justice is being eliminated in Russia. The scheme is all-inclusive. Number 1. Criminal prosecution and social isolation of Lada-Rus before presidential elections. Agents of special services were implanted into the ranks of Lada-Rus supporters to sabotage and provoke. Now they act as charges of fabricated criminal case. Number 2. Liquidation of all Russian political party The Vola according to obviously fraudulent scheme. The party had won all cases brought against its leaflets on accusation of extremism. Then 2 regional courts held hearings not informing the party and sneakily claimed the leaflet extremist. Therefore, the party was deprived of the right and the chance for defense. The rest is just a paperwork. All legal requirements are easily ignored by courts. Number 3. Criminal prosecution of activists under Article 282 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. Investigator complained to Olga Avilkina, former activist of the Vola party, charged with alleged extremism under the Article 282, that they have to initiate prosecutions against every activist separately. Indeed, political motivation would have become evident had law enforcers persecuted the whole political organization as a whole. Isn't that a special operation on civil activists' elimination? February 2016. A criminal charge against Marina Gerasimova, former chairperson of the Vola party, is suddenly brought. The case is fabricated with Grachova, a former colleague of Marina Gerasimova. Out of kindness, Gerasimova advanced her 900,000 rubles on important needs. Grachova is a debtor and obviously borrows money not from an ordinary member, but from the right hand of Svetlana Lada-Rus. Although Grachova has other sources of financial assistance, she does not hurry to repay. For example, she turned out to be a cousin of Ilya Gubin, then president of joint stock commercial bank Novikom Bank, which is closely related with Russian state corporation Rostech and Rosoboronexport, the only state agent dealing with military services export and import. and with such persons as Sergei Chemizov, Putin's childhood friend, Vladimir Artikov, husband of Lyudmila Putina's sister and ex-governor of Samara region, who abandoned his post because of mass people protests organized by the Voля party led by Svetlana Lada-Rus. Anatoly Serdyukov, ex-Minister of Defense. In her statements to federal investigative agencies, Lada-Rus asked to check his activity for crimes against state. Therefore, a number of influential people were involved, whose unlawful deeds had been exposed by Lada-Rus. In November 2015, Grakhova claims of her resignation and writes bill of her debt to Gerasimova. She has no ready money, so offers her a car in settlement of the debt. She visits public notary and executes a notarized power of attorney. Then suddenly, most unexpected events follow. Grakhova goes to police and claims that allegedly she was bereaved of her car under the threat of physical violence. Although the case is civil and criminal event is absent, a criminal case is launched and Gerasimova gets hastily imprisoned. Grakhova remains free and enjoys her life. Unembarrassed, Grakhova alters her testimonies. Now she claims that allegedly she was psychologically suppressed. And psychological pressure was allegedly put by a third person, Svetlana Lada-Rus, in her Lada-Rus country house. The only evidence is obviously invalid expert evaluation by psychologists with questionable expertise, which states alleged depression. Eyewitnesses, notary officer and video record from Lada-Rus homestead, which shows Grakhova moving by herself to her car and further home. Nobody and nothing was considered as evidence by investigative officer and the court. That was the way the law enforcers managed to interweave the name of Svetlana Lada-Rus into the criminal prosecution. Their main objective, to get Lada-Rus, was absolutely obvious from the very beginning. Although a brave oppositionist, she is decent and law-abiding, so there is no real reasons for persecution. Therefore, the infiltration of law enforcement agents, who were to claim that they became victims, turned out to be the only possibility to prosecute Lada-Rus. Another evidence of fabrication is a number of questionable expert evaluations, ordered by investigation, with multiple procedural irregularities and fulfilled by affiliated experts. These questionable expert evaluations became the basis of the prosecution. Indeed, there are strong evidences that Grakhova passed her car willingly and legally. Her orthographic bill of debt, notarized power of attorney, video from notary office, witnesses prove that. Since there is no evidences to prove illegality of the event, the investigator applies abstract thing, psychological status of the victim. To start with, best and preconceived expert evaluation by psychologist Zeiger was made. Independent experts conclude Zeiger's report on Grakhova's status does not meet the requirements of objectivity, exhaustive coverage, completeness and scientific validation of expert studies. Expert evaluation has no date, no number, nor stamp of issuing agency. There is no proof of the expert professional competence, nor license of the institution. No source of funding is pointed, although the specialist fulfilled tremendous technical work. The specialist examined testimonies of indirect witnesses, and almost all their testimonies coincide word for word, including illiterate expressions and multiple mistakes. Expert followed the point of view of investigator, that was the violation of objectivity, which violates Article 8 of the Public Forensic Activities Act. Having analyzed the materials of the case and being aware of legal matters, I believe it was pointless to initiate the criminal proceedings only on the basis of that conclusion. According to rough calculations, 500,000 rubles were spent on expert evaluations under the case. According to Yuri Savenko, president of Independent Psychiatric Association of Russia, psychiatry is used in the judicial practice for unlawful and often pseudo-scientific charges. We can see how ordinary article fraud overgrows with other articles. New victims got added, new episodes. And by now, Svetlana Lada-Rus is accused of founding organization which causes harm to the health of population. Main parts in the fabrication of the criminal case were played by former colleagues of Svetlana Lada-Rus. After long years of work together, after incredible improvements they had in their health and life following Svetlana Lada-Rus' patented psychological method, after grandiloquent speeches of gratitude, they suddenly turned out to be victims? According to affiliated expert evaluations, they are mentally diseased. Some of them conspired with media and told reporting lies, hiding their faces. The whole persecution of Marina Gerasimova and Svetlana Lada-Rus was based on their testimonies. The whole matter is really absurd. Professional psychologists with long service, aware of nuances of human psychological nature, they suddenly claim to have suffered psychologically. The investigator does not even attempt to examine another side of the case. He only listens to the party of charge. Allegedly mentally insane people became the basement of the charge, although it is really difficult to believe in their mental health problems. They drive cars, give birth to children, assume leadership positions. Most likely several former employees decided to feather their nests. They demand inconceivable 10 to 15 million rubles compensation for alleged damage. Is that not sordid and inhuman? To embrace the person and keep coming plan to imprison him at the same time. Who are those people? How are they to be characterized? It is up to you to decide. But their deeds do characterize them not as mentally insane, but as most purposeful and resilient. Other people would not have been able to display such a hypocrisy. I have many examples when secret agents were infiltrated into civil political organizations. Criminal accusations were then based on their testimonies. Otherwise, those cases would have fallen apart. They pretended to be somebody else. Today that is the main and most applied method of extremism counteraction department, so-called Center E. The method when the infiltrated provocateurs, agents, snitches overhear something, see something, and then give testimonies. Strictly speaking, that information becomes the foundation of their evidence base. And so is various expert institutions dependent on the Ministry of Justice. They are mainly city offices and therefore dependent, so they just fulfill direct order. Therefore, the testimonies of provocateurs, perjurers, plus biased expert evaluations. And here you go. As a result, you go to prison on these mythical, invented accusations, based on false testimonies of secret agents. Lives of people got broken. A bright example of that is Vladimir Kvachkov. He really cared about prosperity of our motherland. Another example is my defendant, Valery Parfenov, and other key figures of the case of Igor P.R. Zov, Mukhin, Sokolov, Barabash. All of them were engaged in most useful activities in terms of public affairs, historical and juridical activity. In violation of the adversarial principle and the legally guaranteed rights of the parties of judicial proceedings, investigator deliberately does not allow the defending party to add materials to the criminal case to prove position of the defense. He denied to question defense witnesses, claiming them not to be participants of the events. At the same time, investigator initiates expert evaluation of people who had no relation to the events. So due to the lie of some people and outrage of law enforcement bodies, good people suffer, who could have brought so prosperity to community. Investigator put under arrest whole property of all 4 illegally prosecuted women, all together, almost secretly. He does not care that he arrested their only accommodation, that he arrested the only accommodation of Olga Sakhno's kids. Indeed, she owns only 1/5 of the apartment. And court excuses him everything, where protection and justice are to be looked for. Meanwhile, the powers of so-called law enforcers have been extended infinitely. Special law was written for them, allowing them to do whatever they want to citizens. Suppose people went on rally to demand payment of their salaries. National Guard may open fire on them, even on women and children, and they will enjoy impunity for the killing civilians. And they can easily justify themselves. It is enough to claim that they suspected the people they killed in intentions to commit an act of terror. How far are we prepared to go if the government declares its own people to be its principal enemy and establishes the inward army to combat citizens who seek protection of their rights and social justice? I came to the conclusion that the FSB is an appendage of the CIA because they use the CIA's methods in their work with population. They have no task to fight terrorists and defend the country. What to protect the country from if it doesn't exist? There is a derogatory shop opposite the State Duma in Moscow. Huge building, huge name, the country that does not exist, the shop. In fact, we are the country that does not exist. Foreigners took over Russia. They create our history. Who are we? We are aboriginal population. Will we learn to respect ourselves? And the main reason why we can't stand up for ourselves, we have no leader. They keep leader away of people. There is no event of crime imputed to Marina Gerasimova, Svetlana Lada-Rus and their fellows. The case was investigated biased, unilaterally and not objectively, apparently in an accusatory manner. Above-mentioned actions of the investigator deliberately prevent the revelation of truth, knowingly mispresent circumstances, create obviously false evidence base, lead the investigation astray and to obviously unlawful judgment. All the abuses could be committed only as misusing by the officers of their authority, in spite of interests of the service. We have already stated to the Internal Police Oversight Unit and to higher authorities, since nobody is to hear us in Samara Oblast, persistently. All our statements addressed to the General Prosecutor's Office and to other offices have been returned to the same court where our case is held. In our opinion, that is a depraved practice. Again, we have submitted a number of statements on following signs of the crime: fabrication, abuse of official power by investigator Haustov, regarding officers of Extremism Counteraction Center, Rashupkin, Matveyev, Stroikin, who illegally put pressure on Marina Gerasimova. Source in administration of Samara Oblast informs that investigator Haustov was seen visiting Nikolai Merkushkin, the governor of the Samara Oblast. When the governor himself became a target for police investigation, Haustov and Rashupkin reported directly to Moscow. The special operation on elimination of Svetlana Lada-Rus turns out to be supervised by top officers. The tracks lead nearly to the president. The powers that be are ready for anything to stay at the helm, to deprive Lada-Rus of any opportunity to be nominated as a candidate for election. How did the system make that possible? It created the Extremism Counteraction Department. Their duty is to collect information about civil activists. Broad network of informants serves to the purpose. However, slander of a neighbor or business competitor may be executed as operative information with all the consequences. It means that nobody is safe to say, "It's nothing to do with me." Today, anyone may become a victim of lawlessness. They only begin with activists and human rights defenders. It's Extremism Counteraction Department who plays a main part in operative information shaping in every specific address. And hardly anybody cares to check whether it's reliable, just stand and assault team. Investigation is only possible if an officer suffers. Just think, it has been created an enacted scheme which turns helpless any citizen.
Only 0.2% of public criminal proceedings are declared acquittal in Russia today.
65% of all cases are held by special arrangement. It means the defendant avows his guilt and hopes his sentence to be reduced. Almost 120,000 people in Russia are serving unfairly. Everybody may become a victim of fraudulent prosecution, and it is nearly impossible to prove your being not guilty. 9 of 10 defendants avow their guilt, not because they are guilty, but because the chance of being acquitted is 1 against 500. That is the story of my husband. In February of 2005, at midnight, he left the house to buy beer. He moved 15 meters from the entrance and was detained by police officers. He was delivered to police department and remained there for 2 days. My husband was severely beaten. At about the time when he left the house, a pregnant woman became a victim of assault. The criminal took off her handbag, pushed her in the snowbank, and ran away. Only 8 days later did my husband manage to stand up from his bed to examine the battery. We submitted complaints on all the procedural irregularities committed. We truly believed, wrote complaints, submitted them, etc. What did we achieve? Police officers were never punished. The case was referred to the court. The trial lasted 2 years. During the trial, my husband was under travel ban. The victim claimed that the offender closed her mouth with a hand in a glove. Lipstick got smeared on it. She nosebleeded, and her blood was to remain on the coat of the offender. We commissioned corresponding expert assessment. When we first said that insist on the expert assessment, we were all taken off the courtroom. And counselor said to my husband, "Misha, the judge suggests that if you do not show off, you will be sentenced to 3 years. Serve your sentence and you'll be okay. If you show off, you will get the fullest." My husband said that he was not there. He never committed the crime, and he wanted to prove his not being guilty. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years in strict regime colony. Of course, I did my best to find the victim and to talk to her as a woman to woman. I asked her the question, "Masha, please tell me the truth. Are you sure it was my husband? If you are sure, I'll accept that." And she said, "No, I'm not sure. Police officers told me that was him, and then I identified him as offender." I did my best to contact the judge. Being a lawyer, I remember every word he said. I do understand the case is corrupt. There are holes in the case, but we are in the same system. I cannot turn against it. I've got an order from on high. I must not have acquittal except under Article 105. Homicide at that moment.
A real genocide is underway in Russian prisons.
Elimination of nation, enslavement of people. Amount of prisoners in Russia 3 times greater than the average all over the world. 80% of imprisoned in colonies are young people of working age. They get despoiled of their future. They are turned into cripples by beating, torturing, by hunger and cold, denying medical care, infecting with tuberculosis deliberately. The work of justice system today plunges in horror, as if the presumption of innocence had not existed. The court allows investigators everything. Made materials of a case, mistakes, inaccuracies, clear falsifications. According to the Supreme Court's recommendations, individuals must not be arrested unreasonably. The suggestions during investigation must be substantiated. Yet, in Gerasimov's case, 1 word of investigator was enough to keep her in pre-trial detention facility. Procurator seemed to be presenting only formally, does not try to sort things out, and just consents with the judge. In their sentences, judges often repeat every word of the investigator's request. The Extremism Counteraction Department officers repeatedly and illegally told me that the courts are ordered. They did not hide that, and the decision of the courts will depend on what they say. The said is really true in our life. A woman who was not found guilty has already spent behind the bars a year, suffering real tortures. The only reason of that is her proactive civil position in life. Is that a return to Stalin's repressions of 1937? The end of the case, obviously, is the peak of fabrication. When introducing the materials of the case to lawyers, investigator Haustov did not shape them correctly. Files were not sealed, no inventory of materials, not even proper numbering. 30 pages were simply removed from the first volume. In a word, anything was done to facilitate further manipulation with papers. One more way to cover fabrication is the case file review time reduction till absurd. Investigator Haustov accused attorneys for Marina Gerasimova in alleged procrastination, while the responsibility rested with him. He presented only for 2 or 3 hours a day, without possibility to copy or take photographs. Simple calculation of reading speed indicated that the attorneys worked with the files with maximum speed, less than 2 minutes per page. Moreover, they were forced to abstract from the review to take part in hearings initiated by the investigator Haustov. 11 hearings took place during 2 months allocated for the case files review. But Haustov claimed participation in the court's hearings as a delay of the reviewing too. As a result, the court limited the review's time floutingly. The attorneys were deliberately deprived of the time for analysis of the files. Amount of physical evidences was evaluated by Judge Tiranin from the words of investigator: "We have a pair of bags and some boxes." Conspiring of the court and investigation officers was clearly shown. The right to protection was again disturbed from the position of strength. Many times in Russian history, progressive public figures have been liquidated, and people kept silence. Does the same take place now? Everything depends on public opinion, on every one of us. Only 20 years has passed after the USSR, 25, when we were the masters of our country. I believe that the mad must either finish or the people will become extinct entirely, and so will the country. They write in the Newsland that we have passed the point of no return. I do not believe. If the Russian people wake up, they erase any point of no return, because neither logic nor anything else may restrict us. Russian people are really strong, really great. If only we want, we can protect, and easily. It is the main point, to want and not to be afraid. And there is nothing to be scared of. We often asked, "Are you not afraid to speak aloud?" But I just see the situation, and one should fear to fear. When you are afraid, you are a suicide murderer. When you are not afraid, the God is with you. You defend your homeland, your people. What could be better? Nothing.